All right, what's going on, Latin Wealth family? We got another episode to the Latin Wealth podcast. And in addition to another episode, we got another guest on the podcast that I'm extremely excited to have on because it's another Latina entrepreneur. It's just going to be a phenomenal episode. She has a phenomenal story that we're going to get into. A little bit about my guest. She is the owner of Wealth para Todos. And it's a platform that she's created, and we'll get into everything that she's doing over there. Some of the things that she's done within a 19-month time frame. She's knocked out $23,000 in student loan debt, saved a 6 month emergency fund, created an early retirement plan, and there's some other things that she accomplished as well. And now she's teaching everybody what she's learned through this process to the community. So very impactful stuff. I love highlighting individuals like this to share their stories, just because there's other people that are going through this as well, and they need to find a light at the tunnel, or they need some representation on how they can get out of their situation. So this is why I had to have Soledad Fernandez Paulino on the podcast. How are you doing today?
I'm doing so good, and I'm gonna make sure everyone knows my entire name. I'm Rita-Soledad Fernández
Okay,
Paulino,
yeah, okay,
but
do
I go
that.
by Soledad, and people even call me Sol. So
Okay,
I go even
okay,
shorter, but I always like to rep the entire name.
cool, absolutely, we appreciate that. How's your day going?
My day is going great. I'm so
Yeah.
excited to talk to you all and to have access to your listeners and let
Mhm.
them know about, building wealth poco a poco.
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you once again for jumping on the podcast. We really appreciate it. And on this podcast, how we like to get started is we like to get started with your background and your journey to getting to where you're at, and really you growing up and your story and whatnot. We want you to highlight your story.
Yeah. So I am the child of Mexican immigrants. My parents divorced when I was 5. I grew up in Los Angeles in a neighborhood that at the time had a lot of gun violence, gang
Mhm,
violence,
mhm,
poverty. People were struggling. People were struggling financially. I was
mhm,
blessed to have a mother who was a teacher, and that
mhm.
provided a certain level of stability for us. But nevertheless, there was a lot of trauma in our neighborhood. It
Which
was
city?
common for us in LA,
Okay.
specifically right by Dodger Stadium. It's Echo Park. It's
Yep,
going
yep,
through gentrification now. Now it's a
yeah, yeah,
completely different neighborhood.
yeah.
But time, at the time, I mean, I grew up playing outside and knowing that if cars slowed down, that means we needed to drop to the floor because someone was going to start shooting.
Mhm,
And I attended a high school that had a 54% dropout rate, and a lot of people got into got into drugs when they were
mhm,
younger. They got pregnant at a young age. There was
mhm.
just a lot of struggle. There was a
Yep.
lot of struggle in my neighborhood, and that impacted what I thought someone with my background was capable of doing. I
Mm,
went to college, and so I graduated from this high school that had such a low graduation rate. I did get into college. I was a full scholarship kid, and yet I was so used to showing up to places not feeling like I could be my whole self. I felt like I
mm,
didn't belong. I felt like I didn't fit in, even if I was in places with other Latinos. I was like, well, I'm queer. I don't know if
mm,
that's something that's going to be
mhm,
accepted. I didn't, I was raised by a single mom, so I didn't
mhm.
have that experience of like having two parents in the
Yeah.
household. I also had struggle, like economic struggle. And so there was a lot of times that I just felt like I had to compartmentalize a lot of my life. And
Mm.
I just spent a lot of my life compartmentalizing, only revealing certain parts of myself that I thought would be accepted by whoever I was around.
Hmm. Absolutely. That's a crazy, start to your story. It's funny because my parents, they're from LA as well. They're from Inglewood. And, they were young when they had me, so they were kids themselves, and the relationship thing was in and out. But the same thing that you're speaking about, the violence, the drugs and whatnot, the environment, my mom seen that, and at a young age, I think I was like 3 or 4, she just uprooted us and was like, yo, we gotta get out of this environment because I don't want my son to be raised over here. So yeah, I can definitely agree with you. I got family back in LA, so I know how it is, or and how it was as well, for sure.
Yeah, and all of that, it impacted me. It impacted me because I felt like even when I went to college, I felt like I didn't really belong. I
Mm,
I went, I got my bachelor's, I got my master's, and I just felt like,
mm,
you know what, I'll just be a really good student. But I was also working full time while going to school. And
mm,
that was something that I think impacted how I networked with other people
mm,
and the information I had access to, right? Because a lot
mm.
of times, like, we only know better until we're exposed to better. And if you
Exactly.
don't believe that you belong in certain spaces, then it can get really uncomfortable being in spaces where you could actually get access to information
Yeah,
that can change your life,
for
right? And
sure.
so for me, while I was in college, I went to NYU. Again,
Mm,
a lot of access to certain opportunities, but I was working full time. I felt more comfortable working than I did often being in my
mm.
classes or attending certain events that probably would have propelled my financial journey.
So you went to NYU, that's New York. How talk to us about that transition in your life coming from LA, where you gotta, what I'm saying, if you see a car coming by, you gotta lay on the ground. Now you're in New York City, which is a totally different world compared to LA. Talk to us about that experience and what did you learn, what I'm saying, from that change?
Yeah, well, for me, straight out of high school, I got accepted full scholarship to a small liberal arts school. And while I was there, I dealt with discrimination because I was the only Latina, the only female, the only person of color,
Hmm.
as a math major at that time
Mm,
in my year. And so I was in a small liberal arts school, and I just thought, like, if I'm going to deal with this bullshit, I might as well deal with this bullshit at a university that has a name.
mm,
So I dropped out of that school, went to community college, got into a car accident, dropped out of community college. I was helping my mom financially at that time. And then I just realized if I'm really going to finish school, I need to get away from
mm.
from my family, from the neighborhood, from, like, if I'm really going to be able to focus, I just need to get away.
Yeah.
And
Do you feel like it was a
NYU,
distraction or
yeah, there was
yeah.
a distraction. I think part of it is that I hadn't learned how to deal with trauma at that
Mm,
point in my life.
I
What
see.
I knew was to dissociate. I knew to run. That was accessible to me. And
Mm,
so there was trauma that I had experienced in my neighborhood, and yeah, it distracted me. I know that I
yeah.
am somebody who deals with PTSD. Back then I didn't know that. I
Hmm.
didn't have that information to me. And so I left, went to NYU, and I did what I knew how, like, what to do best with my trauma, which was just like zone in, focus in on school and work, keep myself
Hmm.
busy. And I think a
Yeah.
lot of people in marginalized communities, back in just people of color, women, LGBTQ plus, who have not had access to therapy or a space where it's okay to discuss your emotions. Working is a way that we survive. It's literally the dissociation that we need from our own feelings, from our own body, so that we
Hmm.
can focus on surviving,
Yeah.
and other things. And
Yeah.
that's what I did.
Yeah, no, I love it because at the beginning of this year, I started going to therapy myself. And a lot of people, there's a stigma behind therapy. Like, if you're going,
So much.
something's wrong with you. And I'm like, nah, it's just, I want to figure out ways to improve. And I know there's things, like you said, some traumas that we went through that as growing up, we feel like it's just normal. Just things that we experience, just laying on the ground when a drive-by comes by. That's normal. That's not normal, right? We got to dig those things up and figure out like how to address those and recover, not recover, but like what's the word I'm looking for, figure out ways to come back from that, I guess, and learn from it and move on, right? But again, a lot of those traumas that we went through when we're young, we just feel like it was just normal things, but they're really not. They're traumas.
Exactly. And it's why when I talk about dinero, I always like to talk about the systemic barriers that impact people's financial security, right?
Mm,
Because if my mom, who was a single mom at the time, had more affordable childcare, or if she was going to have access to affordable housing, then maybe she would have left the neighborhood, right? If there were certain systems in place that help the overcrowdedness that existed in my high school, right? If there was more chairs, like literally in
mm,
my high school, not every student had a chair to sit in because there was more
wow.
students than there were desks. right? Those
Yeah,
are systemic issues that impact people's ability to go to school,
for
to then
sure.
access, a higher education. And then now I think about, the cost of a higher education, right? Who has access to that? Who has access to repaying student loans? And then also just the safety, right? If we're going to
Hmm.
grow, if we're going to evolve as people, we always need to have a sense of safety. And
Hmm.
trauma will make you feel unsafe. And
For sure.
there's things that systemically can be done to make people feel safer.
Hmm. Yeah, that's absolutely true. So I want to fast forward a little bit to 2019. By this time, you have a family, you got two young kids, and unfortunately, during this time, you got sick, right? And I'll let you tell the whole story, but it was this moment where you started to pick up a financial literacy book. You picked up Total Money Makeover by Dave Ramsey. Talk to us. What made you even pick that book up? What were you learning through this process, and like what was your headspace at? Right, you mentioned that your kids couldn't really hug you because you were physically kind of suffering and hurting and whatnot. So what made you like put your mind to pick up this book, and where did the
Yeah.
book come from? Was it just laying in your house or?
Yeah. So I got sick. There I had so much inflammation in my body. Now again, I can say that I had PTSD, and the stress of avoiding all of those emotions,
Mm,
all those memories started to impact me on a physical level. But I didn't know that,
interesting.
and doctors didn't know that either.
For
And
sure.
so I ended up getting inflammation throughout my body, my lungs specifically, which impacted my ability to breathe, which kept me on bed rest. And because of the inflammation in my body, my kids couldn't hug me and I couldn't pick up my kids. I couldn't walk to the restroom without like that whole thing.
Mm,
And it took 6 months for the inflammation to come down and yeah, to decrease, right? And during that time, I'm on bed rest and I'm struggling big time because my
mm,
entire life I have been working, having multiple jobs. Work was always my way to dissociate from from the memories and the trauma that I had experienced in my life. And now I'm stuck in bed and that's it.
mm,
That's all I'm supposed to. So I think there was a part of me that was like, I can't, like I
mm,
need something to
mm,
distract me. And I have a cousin and he's a Republican and
mm,
he had learned about Dave Ramsey from church.
mm,
And so he told me, oh, like, why don't you read this book? I was also had expressed to him at the time, like, hey, my medical bills are coming and my disability checks haven't arrived yet. And he's like, well, you need a budget. And I didn't know what a budget was. No one had ever
mm,
taught me what a budget was. And I was like, how did you learn? And he said, oh, I learned about budgeting from this book, Dave
mm,
Ramsey. And I picked up the book and I read it, and it Dave Ramsey is somebody who talks dinero and has
mm,
helped a lot of people with his information. And I think for me, it really triggered a part of me because of the shame. He uses
mm,
a lot of shame. Like
yeah.
you should, you shouldn't step into a restaurant until you've paid off all of your debt. And that shameful voice is something that was very familiar to me.
Mm,
I'm a daughter of a Mexican mother. Like
for
the
sure.
way that my family, controls you is by shaming you. The biggest insult is to be called a sinvergüenza, to be somebody who doesn't have shame. So I think I read that book and that voice really did, like, it triggered me. It triggered me in the sense of, I was like, oh, I gotta take action. Like I am a sinvergüenza. How
Hmm.
embarrassing that I am 32 years old, have a degree, and I don't know, I'm still in debt and I don't know how to budget and I don't have a plan for retirement. And so I read that personal finance book and then I started reading all these other personal finance
Hmm.
books. And unfortunately, none of them really acknowledge all the systemic factors that impact people's financial insecurity until I read this one book by Ashley Feinstein. And it was the first personal finance book that I read that had cariño. There was no shaming at all.
Mm,
And it was like, hey, you know what? These are routines, these are habits that you can use to develop your financial security, and you don't need to shame yourself.
mm,
You don't need to feel embarrassed. It's
mhm,
okay. And that level of cariño and love, just, I realized, oh, it's one thing to get out of debt. And I was able to pay off my student loans. It was like 23,000, my husband and I together, what was remaining after 10 years of payments. I was able to pay that off in 4 months. But the next
wow.
challenge was to build a 6-month emergency fund. And that was going to involve $30,000 for my family. And I
Mm,
thought, there's no way, like, I can't shame and deprive myself into saving $30,000. That's going to take
crazy.
so long. I can't not go without getting my nails done or not getting
Yeah.
my hair done. And I can't do that and build it. So I needed to learn a new way. And for
Mm,
me, it was radical self-love and
mm,
acceptance and cariño and
mm,
patience. That's why I always
yeah.
say like poco a poco todo con tiempo, because
Yeah.
I chose to be patient so that I could enjoy my journey to building wealth.
Yeah. And something else that you bring up in a lot of the conversations you have with people is this word sustainable, creating a sustainable lifestyle. And you're kind of speaking on it right now. And I would love for you to talk more about this word sustainable. Doing enough that makes sense for you guys without making these huge, crazy sacrifices that just don't make sense for you guys. And, why is it really important to build a sustainable lifestyle? Why is it also important to be clear on the life that you want to live?
Right. So I think this becomes especially important if you're trying to retire early, right? If you're
Mm,
trying to build wealth, you want to get to this point where you have enough money in your investment accounts that you can work because you want to, not because you have to.
mm,
In order to get to that point, we're looking like minimum, most people are going to need to work 10 years. And that's if they're investing a lot of money. It's one thing to do something for a little bit, but 10 years of your life, do you really want to spend 10 years like sacrificing all this stuff? Like, I mean, I know people do it, but it's just like you have to enjoy your journey. You have to
so
protect your joy.
yeah, not to cut you off. So when you say to work the 10 years, are you talking about like not going to the nail salon for 10 years, not getting a haircut for 10 years? Is that what you're meaning?
Well, it depends, right? It
Yeah.
depends on the budget that people set up and how much they decide to save
Hmm.
and invest in a monthly on a monthly basis, right?
Right.
So for me, the way I paid off my debt was because I got rid of a lot of things. And
Mm,
plus I was on bed rest, right? I was sick. So it's not like I could go out. I wasn't
yeah.
able to go out to restaurants. I wasn't able to, throw parties and have people come over to
Right.
my house. That wasn't accessible to me at that time. So that's how I was able to pay off all that debt in such a little bit of time. I just
Mm,
let go of a lot of things and set all my money to debt. I wasn't going to live my rest of my
yeah.
life like that.
Right.
Like I didn't
Yeah.
want to live the rest of my life like that.
For
And so
sure.
I had to figure out how to increase my income so that I can send more towards investments and savings. But that takes time, right? It's not like you just come up with a business idea right away and all of a sudden, you have people who want to buy from you. That
Hmm.
takes time. Or even if you're choosing to change your job, it takes time to apply to a new job. It takes time to get a promotion. And
Mm,
so I knew, yes, I was going to increase my income, but decreasing my expenses and doing that, like I needed to make it sustainable. I needed,
mm,
because deprivation isn't sustainable.
for sure.
So I knew like, okay, what is the life that I want to live?
Mm,
What does bring me joy? How do we make something sustainable? We we decide, okay, what is it that really matters? What I realized for myself is actually I wasn't someone who needed to get my nails done all the time.
mm,
That was just something that I thought I needed to do.
mm,
However, I also knew that I do like eating out. So I
mm,
needed to create a line item in my budget for eating out because I'm not going to be someone who's only eating at home. I need to make it sustainable for myself. I needed to also create a loved one emergency fund because if my family came and needed my family, loved one, anyone needed money, I knew that I would want to help them out. That was just part of my values. So when you start to think about how to create a sustainable budget, you need to think, what are your values? What are the top three things that no matter what, it's
yeah.
important to you and you're always going to find the money to spend on it anyways. For me,
Yeah.
eating out,
Yeah.
helping my family, and I was saying now just like having a very clean home. That's really important to me. So that
Hmm.
means that my budget's always going to include, paying a certain amount of money for rent so that I have a certain living condition. That means I'm going to have a certain amount of money so that I can eat out at the frequency that I like on a weekly basis and that I
Hmm.
have a loved one emergency fund. For people who
Absolutely.
are listening, you have to decide what are the things that are most important to you and you build around that. And then you start to decide what isn't so important to me. What am I
Hmm.
just spending on because maybe my family tells me I need to spend money on that. My friends tell me that it's a good idea to spend on that. Decide for yourself because then it's not going to feel like a sacrifice. It's not going to feel like
Hmm.
deprivation.
No, that's phenomenal. I love what you said about like what are your values, right? You value your money. I'm sorry, you value your family. right? You value your family. You want to help them out if they're ever in need. Your kids and whatnot, going out to eat, those type of things. Those are things that you value. So I definitely love that point. But getting to that area where you're looking to save money, cut debt, invest in things of that nature. You was the one that read the book. I'm not sure if your husband necessarily read it, but talk to us about getting your partner on board with investing. Because I know for some people it can be an easy conversation. Some people will do it, but for others, you get into it and there could be some difficulties, right? Like some
For
people are
sure.
used to traveling or buying things, and now we're cutting back, right? So talk to us about the conversation that you guys have, and what would you recommend to couples out there that are dealing with, like, hey, we're trying to get on the same page and we need some help.
The first thing is you have to improve your communication. I mean, I can tell you how I did it. I made a lot of
Mm-hmm.
mistakes. I made a lot of mistakes. I signed on to my husband's like website for his 401k and set it up so he could max it out. Like,
Mm-hmm.
don't do that.
And he's like, what is going on? Where my money going?
Yeah, and then all of a sudden his paycheck's a lot lower. He was not happy. Don't do that.
Yeah, yeah.
My husband was really nervous about investing. He didn't like the idea of investing in a 401k. He
Mm-hmm.
wanted his money in his hands, and this idea that you invest more and eventually it's going to grow. He didn't like it. He had no money invested at all. I at least had some money invested when I was 23 years old in my employer retirement account in a 403b. So first of all, don't do that. You want to engage in communication. And I think for all couples, part of what you have to be able to do is engage in reflective listening, which means that you need to say statements like, I feel that retiring early is possible for us. I feel excited about the idea of living debt free.
Where do you learn that
Because
from?
I learned about reflective listening in marriage therapy.
Wow, I need to look into that. That's dope. I like that.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh,
That's a
yeah.
gem right
Like
there.
you can Google reflective listening in terms of like communication. But obviously I realized that I needed to go to marriage therapy because as we were building wealth, I also realized like, oh, a lot of things are coming up, right? Like you start to notice all these insecurities that you have,
Yeah.
the traumas that you've witnessed, the things that you're fearful of. And so while I was working in individual therapy, part of my wealth journey was also going to therapy to learn these communication skills so that it wasn't just, hey, my way, I know better. I'm the one who's reading. Just listen to what I say. That wasn't going to work. We are building a life together. And I think that's something that couples need to remember, that if you want to build a life together, then you need to decide what that's going to look like, and you need to dream together. And you need to be comfortable sharing that. So again, with reflective listening, you are making I feel statements. And the other person, so I feel because I need, and you express that, right? I feel excited about the potential. I feel excited about being able to retire early because my parents worked until they died. I need to create a financial plan so that I can retire early. And then the other person should hear that and should validate that. Oh, that does sound exciting. Yeah, I could see that the idea of being work optional can excite you. Am I understanding it correctly? And then the other person can confirm it. And then after validating, they empathize. Yeah, I can see that because you saw your parents working until they died, that the idea of being able to enjoy more of your life sooner is exciting for you. And you validate, you empathize, and sometimes that means that you apologize. Now, that same reflective listening, that using those statements, I feel because I need, and then choosing to validate, empathize, that can also be used when there's conflict. And there's gonna be conflict. There's gonna be conflict in around creating the budget. I mean, I know like for my husband and I, we've had part of what we decided is like, what's really important to you, what's really important to me, right? Luckily, we both like eating out. So that was like,
they're both foodies.
you were both
Yeah.
foodies. So that like, that was like, okay, we're gonna have money for that. Luckily, we both come from single mothers, and both didn't come from money. But there's couples where, one of you may have come from money, might get a little bit more financial support from your family, and another person who is the financial support for the family, right? So again, I was lucky that my husband and I both come from these similar backgrounds. So wanting to help our parents is similar. However, I love throwing big Mexican parties. And although my husband's Dominican, he's an introvert and he doesn't like having these big old parties. And so that's where, we started to have conversations and talk about why we wanted it. And so part of what we did was set up, we do joint finances. I don't think every couple needs to do joint finances. Some people might have certain expenses that are joint, may have a joint checking account, joint savings account for certain things, and then keep your separate accounts. Some people do it all together, and some people do it completely separate. I'm not somebody who says like you need to do it a certain way. I have a combination of both, and part of what my husband and I realized is that we each needed to have money that, hey, you spend it how you want to, I spend it how I want to, you save how you want to, I'll save how I want to. We had common goals and common things that we wanted for our life, but there was also an acceptance of like, hey, Soledad is going to be spending her monthly money on these big birthday parties. That's Soledad's thing. Joel is going to be playing poker. That's Joel's thing. And just, giving each other the space to do that. But again, it involves a lot of communication and at the end of it, a desire to really build wealth juntos.
I love that. I'm curious, why isn't our community talking about finances more in the household? Why isn't this something that's spoken about more in your opinion, right? I'm sure you growing up, that wasn't something that was spoken about. A lot of people we've had on the podcast, they can say the same exact thing. What is it? Just because we're fearful, we're not educated? What is it?
I think it is, society's expectations, right? In society, you're not supposed to talk about money, politics, or sex. And in Latino households, even more. Even more. It's considered disrespectful. It's considered, stepping out of your lines. And I also think there's systemic things that have impacted us, right? For some, like within, the Latino community, Black community, indigenous communities, people of color, there have been systemic things that have caused wounds. When we look at, redlining and what certain banks have allowed certain people like get these mortgage loans, and then they have a variable interest, and the next thing you know, people can't afford. Like all of that can cause shame. And I think in general, there's a low capacity for shame and embarrassments and guilt. And part of, I know a key thing in my wealth building journey is increasing my capacity for shame and guilt and embarrassment. I had to get comfortable with, okay, you know what? I'm going to ask a lot of questions that maybe as a 32-year-old with 2 kids, I should know already. And maybe someone's even going to make fun of me because of that. But I would rather get, look silly asking questions and feel that embarrassment than I would 10 years from now and still not having a retirement plan and still carrying debt. But I had to make that decision. And sometimes, you don't, it's easier to dissociate. It's easier to avoid. It's easier to push away anything that's going to make you uncomfortable. And for a lot of us, we feel uncomfortable when there's shame, guilt, and, embarrassment around.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's funny because you even said that in one of your past conversations that you're late to the game. Your journey started in 2019. But I look at that as like, man, this is somebody that got the information and she took action, and now she's teaching it to people, which is very empowering for people out there to know like, hey, doesn't take that long, what I'm saying, to get into this space and really to improve your financial situation. So hats off to you for taking action recently, and now you're on a roll, right? Now you're teaching people how to do it as well. Going back to you and your husband, I think I was reading somewhere you and your husband are on track to retire at the age of 45. A lot of people can't wrap their minds around that, or how the heck that's even possible. Can you break down in a couple steps how you guys are planning to do that, or how that can be possible for other people listening?
Yeah. Okay. Well, the first thing, everyone needs to understand how to calculate what's called a FIRE number, Financial Independence Retire Early number. You take what you expect your annual expenses to be at retirement, and you multiply that by 25. So if you, let me pull out a calculator.
Yeah. This is
So
good.
if your annual expenses are $60,000 and you multiply that by 25, in order to retire, you're going to need $1.5 million. That assumes that you are going to withdraw 4% of your investments every year. Now, it's a general rule, right?
Yeah.
I'm somebody who has very conservative, like I like to invest. I don't invest conservatively, but when I prepare for early retirement, I'm conservative. So I actually withdraw. I have a plan to withdraw only 3%, not 4% every year. So the idea is like you just invest and you keep investing enough money so that you reach this FIRE number. For my husband and I, at a 3% withdrawal rate means that we need to, sorry, let me.
No, this is good. I hope you guys are taking notes. This is good information right here.
60,000. We're going to divide that by 6.3. Okay. So $60,000, if you have a 3% withdrawal rate, requires $2 million invested. Again, that 60,000 is how much you expect your annual expenses to be at retirement. So for my husband and I, we're both looking to invest at least $2 million before we become work optional. And that can seem really like a lot, right? Because especially my husband, who had $0 when he started to invest for retirement. What we do, we max out our employer retirement accounts. We max out tax advantage accounts first. So employer retirement accounts, a Roth IRA, and then we start investing in a taxable brokerage account. And in order to do that, for us, because we're so late in the game, we've needed to increase our income a lot. I actually know that if I wanted to, so for me, I need to be investing $32,500 a year in order to retire early. And for us, we've done a combination of keeping our expenses low and our income, increasing our income, and then taking that difference and just maxing it out, maxing out accounts. If I wanted to retire at 40, I would need to be investing $81,000 a year. Right? I'm going to be 36. So if I like, that's how much money I would need to be investing. I see that as excitement. I think a lot of people, if you're listening to this and your first thoughts are, oh, I could never do that. That's already the problem. You need to address those thoughts because your thoughts are going to impact your feelings. Your feelings are going to impact your actions, and your actions are going to impact your results. So be mindful of what you tell yourself. For me, when I calculate these numbers, I'm like, oh, I need to invest 81,000. I think, oh, how much money do I need to make so that I can invest $81,000? I see it as a game. And my husband and I have literally been seeing this as a game. Worst case scenario, we both turn 45 and we don't have $2 million invested. We only have 1.5 and we need to work 3 more years. Like, who cares? Who cares?
No, I love what you said about, taking care of your mentals, right? And getting that right. Because if you are saying, like you said, I can't do that, you're immediately turning off your brain to figuring out any solutions, how to get there. But if you're like in your situation where your mind is open to it, wow, this is exciting. How can I do this? What are some ways I can increase my income? Your brain is literally going to start moving and thinking about and attracting different ways for you to get to that point. So again, it starts with those traumas and the limiting beliefs that we have, and really breaking that barrier and opening up your mind to receiving new information and figuring out different ways to increase your income, right? So I love that.
And it doesn't happen overnight, right?
No,
I think about myself in 2019 who thought, could I even pay off $23,000 in debt? And then could I even save $30,000? Then I remember the first year I maxed out my Roth IRA, which was $6,000. Can I even do that? And then it's like you do it, and you do one, and you do another, and you do another. And that's how we build confidence, right? That's how we expand. That's how we evolve. And so this is the first year that I'm working on maxing out my solo 401k since I'm self-employed. And right now it's September, and I have invested $16,000. I need about $4,500 more. to get there by December, right? In order to do that, like it's looking at the numbers and I'm just getting creative about it. But it starts little by little, you know? So if you're listening to this and it's like financial independence scares you out, okay, so don't start with financial independence then. Start with, you know, paying off a credit card that has a high balance and see like, okay, what would it take for me to pay off this credit card that has a $6,000 balance in the next 3 months? Start there. Pay off that credit card in full. And then, okay, what is it going to take for me to build an emergency fund that covers 3 months of my expenses? 3 months of expenses sounds so crazy. Start with 1 month of expenses. Once you do that, what is it going to take for me to max out my Roth IRA? What would it take for me to max out my employer retirement account? What would it take for me to do both of those things and also contribute to a taxable brokerage account? And you have to get excited. You have to believe that it's possible for you. And if you don't believe it's possible for you, understand why. What narratives are stronger in your mind right now? What memories are making you think that it's not possible for you? For me, I had to overcome memories of, you know, I've had to overcome a lot of narratives in order for me to build my business. I had a story in my head that, you know, I'm a teacher. I'm not an entrepreneur. Well, Soledad, you're a financial educator. Boom, you can still be a teacher. You know, you have to reframe these things, figure out what are the stories that you're telling yourself, what are the things that come up that are getting in the way. Address that. And then you're going to find yourself like, okay, I can expand. More is possible for me.
I love that. I love that. Amazing. I'm curious, what are some of the different ways that you have increased your finances, right? There's people out there, you said, you know, I think the number was $86,000 a year. How can people figure out different ways to increase their finances if they're working a 9 to 5, right? What are some different ways that you have done it for yourself?
Yeah. So my husband and I, again, we have our joint finances. One of the things that really helped us is that I pushed my husband to apply to new jobs. He's in the tech industry.
Yeah.
He never graduated from college, right? So he went to MIT, dropped out of MIT, and a narrative that he had in his head is, I can't get paid a lot of money because I don't have a college degree. Although he self-taught himself, learned how to code, he didn't think like he could make more money because of this degree. And I had to tell him, like, yes, you can, yes, you can, yes, you can. Like, there's people doing boot camps nowadays. Like, you just have to believe that you're worth that promotion, that you're worth that raise. And so I was there helping him in terms of like supporting him and pushing him to get a raise, to get a promotion, and then to job hop and to leave to a different job and ask for a higher income. I think a lot of times, depending on the industry that you're in, you're going to have to possibly move to a different company so that you can get that salary increase.
Yeah.
I also think for people who work in the public sector, it's a good move to try to work for a company that is publicly traded, that's going to provide you with RSUs, restricted stock units, because that's another way that you can increase your income. You have your salary, and then you're also getting stocks. And then you sell those stocks, and that becomes a house down payment on a multi-unit home. And that diversifies is the way. So that's part of our strategy. For me, I had to learn to monetize my skills and get out of my head of what was possible for me. I started my own business. And the goal is that my business eventually retires my husband. But I had to start small. In 2020, Wealth para Todos made $850. That's it. I had more deductions than I had income. In 2021, Wealth para Todos made $44,000. In 2022, I'm projected to make $140,000. So it's not like a lot of money, but look at those jumps.
Yeah.
And crazy. You know, and I'm grateful that I had my husband where I was like, man, I only made 150. And then, man, I only made 44,000. I'm still making less than what I made as a teacher, you know, and I'm talking about full revenue, not after the deductions. And now like I'm finally at 6 figures, but now I'm at a place that I'm like, dude, you've more than doubled your revenue every single year. You're tripling. It's limitless. But that's because I learned to monetize my skills. I decided to do the work of understanding what thoughts I had about myself. And instead of telling myself, oh no, I'm just a teacher, I had to say, I am a motherfucking financial educator. You know, I am studying to become a certified financial planner. I have skills. I can teach people. I know how to connect with people. I can identify what are their fears. and hold space for those emotions so that those emotions stop impacting their ability to build wealth. And then I just teach them, like when I work one-on-one with my clients, I tell them all the time, like, look, learning to invest, learning to max out your retirement accounts, that's the easy stuff. The hard part is holding space for all these emotions that are holding you back from reaching your full potential, that are interfering with your ability to even dream. That's the hard work.
That's empowering right there, man. That's really good. Speaking about your business, can you break down, and we can start wrapping this thing up. Can you break down what you guys are, what you're doing over there, what you're creating, some of the services that you offer? If people are interested and they want to reach out, please let us know. Talk to us about what you got going on over there.
Yes. So I'm really excited because for the past 2 years, I've been working predominantly only one-on-one with clients. And in 2023, I am launching the Wealth para Todos Academy, which is going to be a membership where you get access to monthly free workshops, not free workshops, monthly financial literacy workshops, also workshops to address your beliefs, your money beliefs. We're going to do thought work in those group coaching workshops. It also is accountability for you to know your numbers, for you to check in and budget with a group and check in to see what is your progress towards your debt payoff, your savings, your investing goals, all while making sure you're taking really good care of yourself, because the basis of any change is really engaging in self-care. And I'm excited to be launching that membership in 2023. I'm looking for 100, only 100 Black and Indigenous people of color, women, and LGBTQ folk. I really want to see if I can get those same results in a group setting in this membership as I have with my one-on-one clients. I have one-on-one clients who are maxing out Roth IRAs, who are paying off thousands and thousands of debt. And I'm like, okay, let's see how we can make this bigger. What is it going to take to help more people? I love that I can say that I've helped dozens of people eliminate debt and start investing. I want to get to the point where I can say I help hundreds of people. That's my goal. So we're doing it poco a poco.
Yeah, that's a blessing right there. I love it. Making a huge impact on the community, much needed. Like I said, we can start finishing this thing up, wrapping this thing up. One last question I had. What are let's go with 2 financial books that you would recommend for as an audience to check out, in your opinion?
Okay, let me get the titles out because I want to make sure they're completely accurate. I would like for people to read Finance for the People, Getting a Grip on Your Finances, Navigating an Unequal System, Stepping into Your Power, Addressing Your Beliefs by Paco de Leon. That's one book. And I'd also like to recommend, can I say 3?
Just do it. Please do.
Okay. I also want to recommend, again, Ashley Feinstein. Her first book is the book that I said talked about personal finance with Cariño. She has the second book is called Financial Adulting, Everything You Need to Know to Be a Financially Confident and Conscious Adult. Again, she's someone who's addressing all the systemic barriers that impact people's financial security. And then my third one is more focused on financial independence, and it's called Cashing Out, Win the Wealth Game by Walking Away by Julian and Kristen Sanders. And this talks a lot more about financial dependence. Again, I want everyone to know that you can find personal finance books. You can find personal finance information from people who look like you, talk like you, who understand the systemic barriers that impact your financial security, and who also understand like you can build wealth without shame. You can build wealth with cariño and lots of self-love.
I love that. I love that. And where can people find you at?
Please follow me on Instagram at Wealth para Todos, on LinkedIn. I also post content on LinkedIn. I have a weekly newsletter. So if you go to my website, www.wealthparatodos.com, you can subscribe. You can subscribe to my newsletter and get weekly newsletters that I'm writing. And then I host different workshops and webinars cada vez en cuando, but I hope that if you're listening and you're like, this is my year, this is the year that I'm really going to start taking action, because so much can happen in a little bit of time. It's crazy when you're ready, when you address all those limiting beliefs, when you unpack the narratives that aren't serving you, you can really take a lot of action really quickly. So if that's something that is exciting you, then I hope you also join me in the Wealth para Todos Academy.
Yes, absolutely. And this has been a really empowering conversation. I really appreciate you. We might have to do a part 2 and dig a little deeper with this, but I really appreciate your time and your energy and your spirit and your knowledge. Definitely reach out if you have any questions about this whole conversation. As you guys know, you can reach out to us at Latin Wealth on Instagram. And I share this episode with one other person that needs to hear this conversation. And trust me, there's a lot of people in our community that needs to hear this information. And with that being said, it's your boy Chris. We'll catch you guys in the next one. Peace.